Donald Trump is officially a convicted felon. And while the possibility of jail time would scare most people, this conviction could turn out to be the best thing to happen to Donald Trump's election chances. Sky News All Stars Rita Panahi, James Morrow and Danica Giorgio take a look at whether Donald Trump's conviction has helped or hindered his presidential campaign. Donald Trump has had an eventful week, even by Trump standards. He was found guilty of all 34 felony counts in his hush money trial by a New York City jury, with his sentence to be handed down on June 11. But instead of scaring his loyal fan base off, the latest hurdle has only galvanized them, strengthening their resolve to get Trump into the White House, which is making Democrats very nervous. Eric Trump revealed that the campaign received over $200 million in donations since the conviction was handed down.
This might be a little inside information, but as I was leaving my house about 37 seconds ago, I asked my wife, what are we up to now? And she said, just in terms of small dollar, we're well over $70 million. This is $21 donations, $43 donations, right? Small dollar donations. If you add the large dollar donations to it, you're over $200 million. But you're over $70 million. And by the way, Maria, wow. 30% of those people have never been seen before by a political party, right? I mean, these are Americans who are pissed off. They're coming out of the woodwork, and they want to support a guy that they just believe is getting bamboozled by a system. And we saw it with impeachment 1. We saw it with impeachment 2. We see it where they weaponize every liberal DA and AG across the country with one intent, to take him down, to slander him, to ruin his reputation, to try and divide his family, to try and bankrupt him, to throw him in jail, to do whatever the hell they can do. And America sees through it. They know exactly what's going on.
In addition to the monetary support, Donald Trump was given a rockstar reception at the UFC over the weekend, further cementing the reality that his fans aren't going anywhere, reveals Sky News All-Star Danica Giorgio.
But it's quite interesting to see now how America has been reacting to this verdict. Now, Donald Trump this afternoon, he went to a UFC fight. Just have a look at the reception that he got.
Donald Trump is in the building, and the former president getting a standing ovation.
Boy, the round of applause he's getting right now is pretty staggering. And you had to imagine that's what was going to happen.
Now, that is an entire arena full of people all giving Donald Trump a standing ovation. And it makes you think, he's always had an ironclad base, James. Yeah. We know this. His supporters have stood by him from the very beginning. All of his legal battles, they've said, it's nothing more than a witch hunt. But that in itself just proves they haven't deserted him despite this conviction, that they are rooting for him no matter what.
And the reason they're rooting for him is because they know that they are the kind of people the Democrats despise, and they understand the attack on Trump is not so much an attack on Trump, it's an attack on middle America, whom the Democrats hate. And so that's why they're for Trump. Regardless of what you think about Trump, he's crass, he's boorish, he's all of those things, but he represents the average American, whom we know the Democrats just despise.
This was again seen at the Bronx rally, where tens of thousands of ordinary blue state New Yorkers came out to proudly support Trump, says Sky News All-Star James Morrow.
But also last week, we did see the extraordinary scenes out of the Bronx where Donald Trump went, and tens of thousands of people, ordinary New Yorkers, blacks, Hispanics, Asians, showed up in their numbers to support Trump. So is there a chance that maybe part of New York is actually on Trump's side here in this one?
Well, absolutely. I grew up in South Brooklyn. That's a very red Republican area. I grew up in a very immigrant-heavy area. Immigrants tend to be conservative. So these are absolutely New York voters who are voting for Trump. And he got a lot, even when you just look at the numbers, he got like 30% of the vote in New York last time, maybe a little bit higher than that. And that's a significant number of people, even though obviously that doesn't win you the state. So it becomes interesting to watch what he ended up doing in the Bronx and how many people did show up for him. The real interesting thing to me there isn't that there's so many people voting for Trump. Again, I think just numbers wise, they were always Trump voters in New York. We just don't really hear from them. The thing was that they were doing it in public with the MAGA hat on in the Bronx, saying, I don't care who recognizes me. I don't care who goes to my boss. I don't care which Karen sees me on TV. I'm going to support this man. So it's a bit that was very encouraging to see that they weren't afraid anymore.
And Sky News All-Star Annalise Nielsen agrees, saying the conviction has only strengthened Republican love for Trump, whilst also strengthening Democratic hate for the former president.
In America right now, are people really believing that this case on esoteric bookkeeping charges would have been brought had the defendant's name not been Donald J. Trump, candidate for president?
Don't forget as well, before this, his predecessor wouldn't bring this case, and they had to pick up a bit of novel law that hasn't been used before. So it's a bit of a interpretation there to say that they just followed the law. No, they really worked at getting this done, which is their right as a prosecutor. Sure, these are laws that are on the books, but they had to try something new to get this done. And so I think a lot of people across America, and the polls are reflecting this, aren't convinced that they have changed their mind because of this. So what we're seeing is people who were voting Republican anyway are now more supportive of Donald Trump. People who were voting Democrat anyway hate him even more than they did before. And so really there's just this small fraction of independent voters, and there's still not a clear-cut decision of how this is going to impact them down the road. And I think too, we're talking about just being 5 months out away from the election, but that's a long time for the rest of the world who doesn't follow politics day to day, who have very cemented ideas about both of the leaders. Whether they like them or not is one thing, but people have their opinions of them is the real point to be looked at here.
Former Trump senior advisor Christian Whiten adds, even Black and Latino voters have sympathy for Trump after seeing the weaponization of the legal system against him.
Do you think that voters, though, I mean, in the Trump camp, in their discussions about going forward, this badge, they're going to hang this, Donald Trump is a felon badge on the former president as he campaigns. Now, clearly he doesn't think this is going to hurt him, and in fact, it may help him. But is there a danger at all that some people will look at this and say, well, Trump's got these troubles, Biden is a mess for a whole number of other reasons, but we're just going to wind up staying home? Is there a turnout issue that you're concerned about here, an enthusiasm gap?
Not an enthusiasm gap. There were polls that were taken sort of generically before. If there were a candidate who were a convicted felon, would you be less likely to vote for him? And people did say yes, they would be less likely to vote. However, now that you're into a specific case of Trump being convicted of these very difficult to understand fraud charges, convictions now, I don't think you'll have that effect. And in fact, the base, I think, will be very, very fired up. And also the new voters that Donald Trump has had success in bringing into the Republican fold, especially blacks and Latinos. Certainly within the black community, there is a current of injustice and of reaction to that. And in that case, you may have more black sympathy for Donald Trump in seeing that he has been persecuted and had the judicial system used against him.
And even the Biden administration's strategy of rolling out star power is working against them, following Hollywood actor Robert De Niro's unhinged outburst outside the court in New York City, says Sky News All-Star Rita Panahi.
My word, we had a lefty lose it in spectacular fashion outside a Manhattan courtroom this week, just a couple of days before the verdict in the third world-style Banana Republic Trump show trial. Yes, there is our broken old lefty wearing a mask outdoors, naturally. It's none other than Robert De Niro, who decided to prove to the world that he is suffering from an acute case of Trump derangement syndrome.
I don't mean to scare you. No, wait, maybe I do mean to scare you. If Trump returns to the White House, you can kiss these freedoms goodbye that we all take for granted. And elections, forget about it. That's over. That's done. If he gets in, I can tell you right now, he will never leave. He will never leave. You know that. He will never leave.
There you go. If Trump wins later this year, it will be the end of democracy, the end of elections. Trump will be a dictator, you know, the type of tyrant that persecutes his political opponents on trumped-up charges and tries to bankrupt them and put them in prison. Oh, wait, that's the current guy.
Danica Giorgio agreed, saying the Democrats would be extremely concerned looking at the vision of huge Trump crowd support over the weekend.
Well, you would think that Joe Biden's camp, if they were to look at this vision, they would be extremely concerned by this because they're probably thinking to themselves, oh, it's over, like he's lost all of his supporters, they're going to flip the switch somehow, but I think you'd be quite worried. But in the end, when we look at that case altogether, it was very convoluted. If you look at the Manhattan District Attorney, Alvin Bragg, he even said that he used a law that hasn't been used before just to get Trump's conviction, which is extraordinary. So realistically, Donald Trump didn't stand a chance from the very beginning.
Of course not. No. But I mean, the response of the crowd at the UFC, that's why they had to go after him and use legal contortions to try to throw Trump out of the race because they know how popular he is. If Joe Biden's 81 million Americans, if he's that popular, why are they going to such extreme lengths to try and remove Trump?
And it seems Trump's conviction is having the desired effect, with Annalise Nielsen confirming Donald Trump is polling ahead of Joe Biden.
Donald Trump is polling ahead of Joe Biden at the moment. Once he becomes president presumptive, if that's what happens, or president-elect, it's a completely different ballgame and no one's really going to know how to deal with this. And quite likely these would just all fall by the wayside.
What impact do you think this will have on Trump's campaign to the White House? It doesn't seem to have hurt him yet.
There's nothing to stop Donald Trump running for president as a felon. He can run it from a jail cell if that happens. He can win from a jail cell if that were to happen. And if anything, it emboldens his followers because he's been saying, I'm being persecuted and they're coming after me and you're next.